Hello and welcome to History Mysteries. I'm Megan, and today we are going to be talking about the lost city of Atlantis. And did it actually exist, or is it just a myth made up by Plato? First things first, Atlantis has been a myth since a long time. Today we're using my Lost Civilizations book, so since I figured since we did treasures last time, we'll do civilizations this time. So, Plato wrote about Atlantis around 360 BEC. We don't know if it's real or not. And honestly, where would it even be? So for those of you who have never heard of Atlantis, Atlantis is this supposedly lost city that is somewhere in, I believe it's the Atlantic? Yeah, somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean that was on an island that sunk. So, people have been trying to find it for thousands of years. And so far, no one's really turned up anything. Whenever I think of Atlantis, I personally think of Atlantis SquarePantis, one of my absolute favorite specials that SpongeBob did. Atlantis started off with some of Plato's later writings in Timaeus and the Unfinished Critias, the first two parts of an intended trilogy, in which the final part was to be called Hermacreatus, although Plato does not appear to have started writing it. The existing works were written in Plato's preferred form, the Socratic dialogue, in which he purports to be recording discussions held between his former teacher Socrates and other characters, in this case, Timaeus, Critias, and Hermocrates. It is difficult to know for certain what Plato intended to achieve with these late works, because the overall project was unfinished. But they appear to continue an examination of the notion of statehood and creation of a just society that Plato had begun in the Republic. The final part of the work involved Socrates discussing several hypothetical cities governed in a variety of different ways as a means of examining what might constitute as an ideal method of governance. So already in here, they're saying hypothetical. Also, if you don't know who Plato is, he was a Greek philosopher and is considered one of the three founding fathers of Western philosophy, along with Socrates and Aristotle. So his stuff is pretty well known, I'd say. In his dialogues, Plato wrote about a long-forgotten war between Athens and Atlantis, which occurred 9,000 years before the period in which he was writing. He described Atlantis as a much bigger and more powerful state than Athens, located on an island, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the two promontories on either side of the Strait of Gibraltar. I think I just made that up. These promontories are, to the north, the rock of Gibraltar. There we go. And on the south side of the strait, either most likely Jebel Musa in Morocco or Monte Hacho in Ceuta. I'll just put these names on screen because I have no idea. The Spanish enclave in the North African coast. In other words, Plato was saying that Atlantis was out in the Atlantic Ocean. Unfortunately, for those people who have since tried to find it, however, he did not get any more specific. So, basically, Atlantis supposedly attacked Athens from the sea, and even though they were more powerful, they were defeated. That makes sense. If you guys know anything about war, if you are attacked on your home soil, you tend to fight better than overseas or somewhere else. So, Atlantis is on Athens' home meaning Athens knew all the tricks and whatnot on how to win. So I'm not too surprised that they lost, despite being more powerful. And also confidence. Apparently, Plato says the Atlanteans had expected to win the war, and it was overconfidence that led to their downfall. That's also two things you need to be careful in war. Home turf always has an advantage, and that works for sports as well, by the way. Home turf has advantage, and overconfidence usually is your downfall. Then, once the war was over, earthquakes and floods destroyed Atlantis, after which it sank into the ocean and disappeared. In describing this destruction, Plato was attempting to use Atlantis as an allegory for Athens in his own time, which he thought had become bloated and corrupt. Interesting. Though in its own self-regard, he thought the city was at risk of suffering the same fate as Atlantis if it didn't change its ways. The inspiration for the story is not known, but Plato may have been looking back into the Peloponnesian War fought between Athens and Sparta during his childhood some 70 years previously. Oh, so he lived a long time. Before the war, Athens had been the strongest of the Greek city-states, but in the end it was defeated by Sparta in a decisive naval battle. So, it's sounding like Atlantis is a made-up city, and what he's using it for is to kind of show, hey, we're going to be Atlantis if we're not careful. So basically, Atlantis here is a metaphor for what Plato is worried that is going to happen to Athens. And since, tons and tons of people have been trying to find Atlantis forever, I think it's pretty safe to say that it doesn't exist, but we'll continue on. Just skimming over the next couple pages here, basically during the Renaissance, a lot of these old works were rediscovered again. So they found the stuff on Atlantis that Plato had written, and newfound interest had begun in Atlantis, and people were like, oh, where is the city at? It's supposed to have all these golds and treasures and riches and whatnot. Yeah, so the Renaissance sparked an interest back into it. But in the late 19th century, there was another, it stayed interesting and relevant for a while, but there was another kind of spark of interest. And the late 19th century is kind of where a lot of people's ideas about Atlantis became more like, these were a group of people that were clearly elite and superior to us, and they're the ones who are responsible for building the pyramids and of Egypt and England, Stonehenge, things that honestly a lot of people still don't know how they were built. Stonehenge, I'm not entirely positive, but I am pretty confident that the pyramids were built by Egyptians. They're not built by aliens. Humans are. What I like about humans is we're very inventive and creative with how we use tools that are very limited. So, yes, there were a bunch of simple tools, but if you're a king and you want people to be like, hey, I'll pay you some bread and beer a day for you to go help lift stones so I can have a nice burial. I don't see why people constantly doubt earlier humans' capabilities, because if they didn't have some sort of capability, how would we have gotten to where we are now? I think people always look back on past humans with their nose turned up. They're like, oh well, they were stupid. But if you think about it, a lot of stuff that we have now is built on stuff that we took and we figured out ways to modify it to make it better, faster, stronger. So, the Egyptian pyramids walked so that our buildings today can run. That kind of thing. Like, if it wasn't for them, how could we do it now? And like, a lot of those techniques are like gone, so clearly I think we just like to look down upon ourselves. Just like, oh, Egyptians? Nah, they're not capable of that. It was aliens, obviously. It's not aliens. Please don't be Ryan Bergara, okay? Here we are Shane Madej. So a lot of this started off with Ignatius L. Donnelly's book called Atlantis, the antediluvian world, where he claimed that Plato's Lost Island was an entire continent on which civilization had first arisen, among many other things, and where the Garden of Eden was located. Now, there's no facts to back any of this up. In fact, Donnelly's book completely took what Plato's idea had and just, like, took it in a completely different, direction. So, there's no facts to back any of... I mean, there wasn't facts to back up Plato to begin with. And now Donnelly's over here like, yeah, and they had horns, too. I don't know if he actually said that. I didn't read the book. I don't really care to read the book. But, yeah. But, here's the problem when it comes to this kind of writing. He pretty much passed it off as like a non-fiction book. And a lot of people read this. It became a very influential, very popular book. A lot of people read this and like took it as fact. Because it's the 19th century. And they're like, you know what? Why not? Atlantis is now a continent. It's where Garden of Eden is. And that is now where civilization came up. We didn't come from, Mesopotamia and the Tigris and Euphrates and the Fertile Crescent. We came from a fictional... I like how it went from island to continent. Where is a continent gonna fit in the Atlantic Ocean? Like, it's big, but I don't think it's quite big enough to have a continent in between two other continents. Whether it's sunken or not. Donnelly also drew a map. I'll insert a picture here, that way you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So he has Atlantis drawn there, and the map is showing, like, the empire of Atlantis and, like, the extent of the Atlantean Empire, and none of this makes sense. It's all bullshit. It's all made up. Because if you look at the map, especially look at Saudi Arabia, I'll, like, find a way to enlarge it or something. How did they get all the way around when there's clearly, like, land connecting there? And then how are they going to pull a boat? If Atlantis did exist, I really highly doubt it would be a continent. I know for a fact it's not where humanity started. And I don't think the Garden of Eden would be there either. It's a very imaginative story, but the issue is a lot of people took it as fact, and it's not. There has been no really evidence of this island/continent ever existing. I'm not going to discourage you from going out and looking for it. Maybe you'll find, something else out there. Because, not very much of our oceans have been explored because they go very deep. But, yeah, I'm not believing this one. Cool idea, cool theory, but I don't think it's real. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of History Mysteries. I had fun reading about this one. Don Lee pisses me off, and also kind of Plato too, but anyway. If you did enjoy, please feel free to comment, like, subscribe, share. We post content every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. In fact, this Friday will be another group video, so I will hope to see you there, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.